Hello, this is Natasha from Earth Mother Star Child, and I'm going to talk to you today a little bit about wholeness, because we've been going through this Earth ascension process that we're sort of in the middle of, and I've noticed that much of my own process has been about returning to wholeness. And when I've been writing, channeling my Venus channelings, I have been receiving information on how human beings were created, and also how we had a split in our consciousness, which we're now, a lot of us are trying to resolve within ourselves, so that we can move back into the unity consciousness, which is the consciousness of the heart. So when I talk about wholeness, I want to describe, I always see the yin and the yang symbol, because obviously I do Chinese medicine, which is a holistic medicine, and I feel that we are all trying to move back towards a state of wholeness. It's like unconsciously we have experienced a split, and we know what wholeness is because the soul was created in wholeness and from wholeness, from a blueprint that was stable and pure. And I think we all try to connect back with that. And if we are disconnected from it, then we feel separate. And this can then manifest itself in the human body, the human mind, the human emotions, as a separation from ourselves, from each other, from our soul light, from our soul family, from God source, goddess source, a separation and fragmentation on all different levels. And one of the interesting things that I work with as Chinese medicine is holistic. It's really about looking at the person as a unified whole, and seeing how an imbalance has occurred that has caused a split or a fragmentation or a splinter, and how we can really bring the energy back into alignment. So I like to look at the yin-yang symbol, and I think this it's called the Tai Yin, where I'm sure you've all seen it. It's like got a white dot in a black sort of kind of teardrop, and then a white drop in and then a black drop in a white teardrop, and really that is showing the process of becoming. It's actually should be moving in a vortex, and the seed of the white becomes, which is in the black, becomes the white, which then the seed of the black is within the white. So it's showing that there is an interrelation, a connection between all things. And I find this very interesting when we come to the masculine and feminine principles, that we live in a gendered world where we are born in either male or female bodies or a mixture of both. And I believe our consciousness has also experienced a split between masculine and feminine. And part of my work is understanding the balance of those, healing the different aspects and bringing them together in the heart in unification, in union. So as we're moving towards the dimension of the heart, we're ascending into the fifth dimension, we are more likely to feel the pull to reconnect into wholeness. One of the problems here is that a lot of our lifetime here on earth is still in a very much a classification phase of the mind, where we split and we separate to analyze, and this is very much part of linear mind and linear thinking, and it's also been part of the programs of the split of the mind, which has also been interrupting the flow into the heart. A lot of these old programmings are leaving. They are part of the old consciousness and the old way of doing things. And we are now coming into the concept of unity consciousness. So if we go from the idea of splitting and fragmentation towards unity. So one of the troubles of splitting is it creates polarities. It also creates much conflict. So we're seeing a lot of that when we're seeing this dynamic of conflict coming up so much, like conflict within ourselves, and within society, within all sorts of different aspects. There's like the tension that happens, and I believe some of that tension has come from the idea that we were whole, and then we had a split because of the tension of so much diversity caught within one small space. It was like, to be able to have room and balance, and the energy was so potential. It really had so much potential energy. It needed to emerge and devolve into something else. And while it finds out what sort of nature it is, what sort of potential it really has, it needs often space to do that, because the actual energy component is so great. It just needs room to evolve and to move within one space. So we see a split while that happens and occurs, and then we see a healing as the two aspects, or three aspects, or millions of aspects come back together again in unity. So if you look at our world on a mass consciousness level, we do see that everywhere. This conflicts that are building up in all different areas of the globe, and then also within families, within communities, and then coming all the way back to ourselves, within the body, within the mind, within the emotions, and sometimes within the spiritual aspects of ourselves as well. So this is quite complicated, because essentially we don't really have to understand all those splits, although it can be helpful, and many of us are working that sort of conflict patterns so that we can release them and return to unity. So unity consciousness, I think, is fascinating, because it really is the consciousness of the heart, and it's like we're a place where we have an embrace for all things. It becomes the unconditional space, the space where we are able to hold within ourselves, within the heart space, which is an infinite space, to hold many different diverse aspects and points of view, and for it to be held without judgment. And this is a process of allowing the evolvement of all the parts of oneself. So the reason this has become particularly important, and I was thinking about today, is that when we begin to judge, then the process into the heart becomes much harder. Now, there is always a place for discernment, because that is part of the process of the heart. And discernment is a bit like judgment, but it doesn't have the force and the harshness, the battle aspect of judgment, because judgment can also sometimes be linked with punishment. So the heart is not about this. So when we come into unity in the heart, this is where we are really looking at the embrace and the acceptance, the full acceptance of many different aspects, many different facets of who we are and what our real nature is, who we are as human beings, who we are as consciousness in matter. And this is the aspects for me where we really begin to touch on unconditional love and also creativity. Like when we begin to create from the heart without judgment, that is where we see the flowings of the divine and the divine nature within us having expression, and being able to move beyond the limits of our own walls of the mind, our own, creations that have been so much in and within the old matrix, where we have been holding ourselves very tightly in enmeshed patterns that do not serve us and do not serve others, and they do not serve the earth either. So this is part of our consciousness change. When we're changing from one dimension to another dimension, we are shifting consciousness. And the old matrix has very much been about the third chakra, the solar plexus chakra, which is also the chakra of mind and the power dynamics. And so it can also be many other things which are wonderful. But unfortunately, it's the bad things that have kept us hooked up into patterns that didn't serve us, and karmic retribution, actually. So as we're shifting into this fifth dimension of the heart, we're also connecting up with parts of ourselves that we may have fragmented from, or we have disassociated from, which becomes very common. And I'm gonna run out of time, so I'm gonna have to do another podcast that we really begin to talk about this split, because when we split from wholeness into, and I think the most conscious split I can think of is we begin to split into good and evil, and this becomes itself a real journey of good versus bad. And that is another huge area where we are trying to move away from, as we move from the area of judgment and punishment, the idea that one thing is good, one thing is bad, and we are moving into the heart space where all things are consciousness, and we can really embrace ourselves with levels of compassion and empathy and awareness and wisdom that we have not really seen continuously on this earth plane as much as we needed to. But this is actually returning, and it's returning through your own consciousness, through your ability to unify your consciousness within your body and your mind, your emotions and your behaviors, to bring it all into the oneness which represents your soul and spirit. So I'm very keen that we have an understanding that this process we're going through is for everyone, and we are all moving through it and all experiencing parts of the puzzle that bring this into being, because not only are we bringing ourselves into unity from a split and all the splits and fragmentations, but also we are bringing each other into unity, and this has a much wider effect that goes way beyond this cosmos that we can really understand. But we are the receptors and the receivers and the transmitters in this process here on earth at this time. So I'm going to split this into 2 podcasts. There will not be Wholeness and Unity right now because I'm running out of time, and I like to keep this to 15 minutes. So I will do a part 2, which hopefully I'll bring a bit more clarity to the introduction I've just given. If you would like to work with me, I would love to hear from you. My name's Natasha Astara. I'm run something called Earth Mother Star Child, which is about using our consciousness for indigos, earth angels, empaths, elementals, light workers and indigos who are really bringing their consciousness here on earth, and I help people to really come into alignment with their soul energy. So if you want to work with me one-on-one, you can find me on earthmotherstarchild.co.uk. I'm also on Instagram, Twitter and Facebook, Earth Mother Star Child, and I'd love you to get in touch and see what's going on. Okay, namaste, blessings.